This is really starting to give me migraines. So far, the production team were 2 for 2 on the direct-to-video Scooby movies, despite the interference from executives the last go-round. However, the success of both movies had convinced said executives that Scooby-Doo was a property that would sell no matter what. This attitude would turn out to be a double-edged sword in the future, but for now, Davis Doy and his team were back to working on the next film in the series with complete autonomy. Now that the formula of combining both masked villains and real monsters had been established, it was time to get to work on the next film scheduled for release in 2000. The script this go-round was written by Doy, Glenn Leopold, and writer Lance Falk. Deciding to take things in a little more of a sci-fi direction this time, the result was Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, where the gang find themselves caught up in what appears to be an actual alien invasion somewhere in the American Southwest. I haven't been able to find a lot of behind-the-scenes information on this movie, and from what I can tell, there will be less and less of it going forward, but I'll try to provide what I can. Unfortunately, there is one fact that I do need to address. This film would be Mary Kay Bergman's last appearance as Daphne before her tragic demise in 1999, and would be a posthumous credit for her. The film is dedicated to her memory. That said, let's see how well Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders stacks up to its predecessors. The film opens with a pan through space, culminating in a signal reaching 3 researchers at a radio telescope station in the desert. These are Laura, Max, and Steve, voiced by Audrey Vasilevsky, Kevin Michael Richardson, and Mark Hamill, respectively. Max and Laura report they picked up a signal, but it's vanished. Steve responds with some good-natured ribbing when Laura comments they may have made contacts with aliens out there.
Maybe they're already here.
Meanwhile, the gang, in their usual rambling way, are driving through the desert. Shaggy and Scooby are navigating while the other 3 are sleeping in the back of the van. Or at least until the radio wakes them up. Shaggy reports there's a town coming up, and of course he and Scooby want to stop for food, despite Fred pointing out they just had dinner a couple of hours before. The gang drive on into a dust storm which is so bad Shaggy accidentally drives off the main road onto a sidetrack, which a sign informs us is government property. As they bounce along, Daphne notices something.
And what's with that sound?
The lights from the UFO blind the gang, and as a result, the mystery machine crashes into a cactus, ruining the radiator. Fred spots some lights in the distance and correctly assumes it's a town. Shaggy and Scooby decide to stay with the van rather than risk the desert at night. This also leads to yet another one of those lines that people with no imagination like to say proves that there's drug humor in this franchise.
Like I know where Velma keeps the stash, Scoob.
Seriously, can we just stop with this now? This joke was old when this movie came out, and it's just dead. You aren't clever or funny by making these kind of jokes about this franchise anymore. Anyway, the boys fight over the last Scooby snack in the box, which winds up going to a passing jackalope, because why not other mythical creatures at this point? They chase the jackalope through a fence and into a cave where they spot a weird glowing light. And then the aliens attack.
Yeah, that's creepy, all right.
This leads into the next version of the Scooby-Doo Where Are You theme, this time performed inexplicably by Jennifer Love Hewitt.
You know we got a mystery to solve, so Scooby-Doo be ready for you, right? Don't hold back. Scooby-Doo, if you come through, you're gonna have yourself a Scooby snack. That's a fact.
I have absolutely no clue why she's doing the theme this time. She was big in the movies, but I honestly don't recall her having any sort of music career at that point. So why the team decided to go with her performing the song, I have absolutely no idea. It's not a bad cover, though. Anyway, the aliens chase Shaggy and Scooby into town, where they crash into the local diner where the rest of the gang happen to be. Naturally, the other three are skeptical, but Dottie the waitress confirms that plenty of people in town have seen the aliens around, especially after dark. She also confirms she hasn't seen them herself, but points out a local, Lester, who also has his own opinions on the aliens.
Them aliens are here to take over the world!
Of course!
The cook, Sergio, tells him to calm down, but confirms the cattle have also gone missing along with the alien sightings. While Shaggy and Scooby drown their fears in food, Fred, Velma, and Daphne talk to Lester, who has a story to tell.
Took me aboard their ship, they did.
Once again, note that Velma's interested in Lester's story while Fred's the one looking skeptical. I plan on pinpointing the moment the roles shift in these movies, so don't worry. Lester recounts the story of his abduction with gestures which imply a usual alien abduction trope, and he claims he has pictures of his abduction. However, it turns out the pictures in question are paintings he did. One in particular grabs Daphne's attention.
This looks like the ship we saw earlier.
Well,
When the satellite dishes are pointed out, Lester reveals the government put them up as part of the South Project, Search for Alien Life Forms. Velma thinks there might be a connection between the dishes and the aliens and wants to investigate. Fred asks if there's a hotel in town, but no such luck. Lester offers to put the gang up for the night, setting Daphne and Velma in the back room and Fred on the couch. Shaggy and Scooby are shown to a couple of lawn chairs on the roof, but this turns out to be a bad idea since the two of them are abducted and wake up in what appears to be the alien spaceship. The boys have the predictable reaction.
aliens!
Scooby manages to undo his restraints and grabs Shaggy, leading into a chase. However, they crash into each other, and as the aliens move in, they pass out, only to wake up the next morning with a hippie chick and her dog looking over them.
Like, what are you guys doing out here?
Like, hi.
This is Crystal and her dog Amber, both voiced by Candy Milo. She's a nature photographer out shooting desert wildlife. Shaggy decides to not tell her about the aliens, not wanting to look like a lunatic, and instead tells her about the jackalope. Because that's nowhere near as crazy, right? It is, of course, love at first sight for Shaggy and Scooby, and when Crystal offers them a ride back into town, Shaggy notices that Crystal's carrying around a lot of equipment.
Whoa, you sure have a lot of stuff.
That looks nothing like photography gear. Crystal drops the boys off at the diner where the rest of the gang are looking for them. And then, the natural order of the universe shifts sharply to the left.
Okay, what's it gonna be? How about you, hon?
Nothing for me. Me either.
What?
Oh yeah, we're going there. In fact, I'm going to show you the most terrifying part of the whole movie right now.
How groovy, just us two, so groovy. Don't forget Scooby-Doo.
No. Just no. And you want to know the really terrifying thing about this? There's a soundtrack album for this movie too, and it's mostly Shaggy singing. I'll give you a moment to freak out about this.
Just us two, so groovy, and Shaggy Jr. too.
Although I will admit there is one part of the song with a pretty good gag.
And even when I'm chasing ghosts, I'll quit in time for dinner, 6 o'clock at the most. How groovy.
Anyway, Shaggy recounts the abduction from the night before, which Lester seems way too interested in.
Did they experiment on you?
After paying for breakfast and Shaggy and Scooby getting cleaned up in the restroom, the gang go in search of a mechanic to fix the mystery machine. The mechanic is not exactly the kind that puts customer service first.
I'll tow it in and work on it when I can.
With no ETA as to when the van will be fixed, the gang leaves the garage only to meet Max, who also knows about the van breaking down.
It's a pretty small town. Besides, you can see that paint job from miles away.
Velma talks Max into giving the gang a tour of the South Station, which he agrees to after buying a fairly large quantity of oil from the garage, which he says is for the dishes. Crystal turns back up, and Shaggy and Scooby head off with her to search for the jackalope, while Fred, Velma, and Daphne head to the South Station with Max. At Scorpion Ridge, Shaggy and Scooby show Crystal and Amber the fence where they chase the jackalope, and Crystal jumps it immediately. Shaggy hesitates, but romance has caused many a man to rush in where common sense tells him not to, so after a couple of guilt-inducing pleas, Shaggy and Scooby jump the fence themselves. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang are getting their tour at the South Station. The South team says the missing livestock are due to local farmers forgetting to lock their pens at night, and that the government sent out a team to investigate reports of alien activity, which is where the fence at Scorpion Ridge came from.
Wasting government money.
Wouldn't be the dumbest thing I've heard the government spending money on. Anyway, while talking to the team, Velma notices all 3 of them have mud on their shoes, which is kind of odd for the desert. Back at the ridge, Shaggy and Amber get an unpleasant surprise.
Hey! You can't do that!
What kind of fancy camera is this?
It's digital.
The MPs tell Shaggy and Crystal to beat it, but as they leave, there's an unusual exchange between the two soldiers.
Bunch of hippies.
I wish we really could bust them.
But it also seems that Crystal has secrets of her own.
I'm not really a nature photographer.
We're what?
No, I'm really a government agent.
Crystal convinces Shaggy and Scooby to help her with her own investigation. Back at South, the tour ends and Lester shows up. Fred and the girls get a ride from him to Scorpion Ridge. On the drive, Velma points out the muddy shoes and something else interesting.
And all that motor oil Max said was for the South dishes? It's the wrong kind for hydraulics.
However, the gang aren't the only ones with suspicions.
You'd better call it in.
Right.
Back at the Ridge, Shaggy and Scooby show Crystal the cave where they saw the glow, but before they can investigate, they hear the MPs coming. Out on the back roads, the rest of the gang spot Buck the mechanic, who is doing something out in the middle of the desert. He tells them he'll get to the van that afternoon. The MPs find the cave and decide to investigate. Hey, a thought just occurred to me. Is this the first time we've ever seen guns in a Scooby-Doo production? I mean, actual realistic-looking guns? I can't remember offhand, but if they've shown up before, somebody let me know. It'll be something to look into if and when I get back home. Anyway, thanks to Scooby's usual trick of being one step removed from a balloon animal, he scares the MPs off, but he and Shaggy are soon terrified, running deeper into the cave when a real snake shows up. Outside, Lester drops off Fred, Velma, and Daphne, and Fred notices green paint on Lester's hands. Daphne shrugs it off with the logical conclusion that of course Lester would have paint on his hands because he's a painter. Velma had Lester drop them off at the Ridge because she believes the only place in the area where the South team could have gotten mud on their shoes is the gorge behind the fence. She suspects there's a river at the bottom and wants to check it out. Shaggy, Scooby, Crystal, and Amber find the source of the glow, but before we can see what it is, we return to the gorge. There's no water, but Daphne spots a set of tracks in the dried-up riverbed, which lead to piles of dirt and rock. The rocks are wet, indicating there must be a water source somewhere. There's also more tracks, which lead into what appears to be an abandoned mine. Fred kicks an empty can of oil, which just so happens to be the same kind Max bought in town. There's also some equipment and supplies lying around. Velma examines a nearby jackhammer and makes a discovery.
I think it's gold!
The boys start planning what to do with their find until Crystal points out that someone else seems to have gotten there first, as evidenced by more equipment.
So who do you think owns all this gold?
And so the chase begins, but some interesting things happen during it. First off, Shaggy, Scooby, Crystal, and Amber are chased by two of the aliens. Fred, Velma, and Daphne find themselves pursued by a third, but as they round a corner, the MPs suddenly join in the chase, and a couple of the bucket loaders we saw earlier. The aliens chasing Scooby's group suddenly break off the chase and manage to capture Fred, Velma, and Daphne. The MPs close in on Scooby's group, but the four make an unexpected escape when the cliff they're on gives way. The aliens order the MPs to go look for them, and Velma decides it's time to end the charade.
You can give up the hokey alien charade now, Steve.
So, you figured it out, huh?
Wasn't hard.
You know, she's right. I mean, Scooby-Doo plots haven't exactly been Agatha Christie levels of intrigue, but this one seems a little more cut and dried than most. There's attempts at making the other characters red herrings, but none of them are all that convincing, and really 2 seconds of thinking will point directly at the South team as the aliens. It's not necessarily bad, it's just kind of anticlimactic. Max reveals that the team found the gold when he stumbled on a small cave entrance while doing survey work for a 4th South dish. The mine itself dated back to the 1800s, but the miners apparently thought it was played out. If they had dug 10 more feet, they would have hit the mother lode. The main hitch, of course, is that the government owns the property and are therefore the legal owners of the gold. So the team kept their mouths shut and started mining in secret, hiring a couple of friends to pose as MPs and help keep everyone away. Oh, and in case you're worried about Shaggy, Scooby, Crystal, and Amber, they're fine and find themselves deep in another cavern. But we've got another question that needs to be answered.
So what's with the alien costumes?
Something to scare the locals so they don't come snooping around.
It also explains the mysterious sounds of our drilling and blasting.
We bought this chopper with some of the gold money.
It's amazing what a few lights and a Hollywood sound effects CD can do. We even make money off the cattle we steal at night to spook the local yokels.
Back in the cavern, the MPs show up and menace the group. This proves to be an error since, as per the standard of these movies so far, there are real aliens here. But this time, they're on the gang side. Of course, Shaggy and Scooby don't see this, and the whole group gets distracted when they hear Daphne screaming. And with good reason, since the South team's about to drop them down a shaft.
Nothing personal. You just know too much.
Yeah, because you just had to gloat, Steve. Fred shares a similar opinion.
Yeah, that's always our problem.
See? Even Fred's getting tired of this shit. Anyway, the three get a stay of execution when the MPs show up screaming they saw aliens, giving Fred a chance to escape the cargo net. Shaggy and Scooby, convinced they were the ones who scared the MPs off before, step in to deal with them. Fred escapes the net and starts pulling Velma and Daphne to safety. Of course, Shaggy and Scooby are in over their heads, forcing Crystal and Amber to reveal themselves. Laura tries to make a break for it, but Steve points out that a pair of captured aliens would be worth more than all the gold in the mine. Because Steve is a douche of unbelievable proportions, and Laura's not much better. Amber traps Max and the MPs with a steel girder, but Steve and Laura chase the two aliens with one of the bucket loaders. Crystal trips, and while Amber tries to hold Steve at bay while Laura goes to help the rest of the team, Daphne clues Shaggy and Scooby into what's going on.
Scooby! Shaggy! Those aliens are Crystal and Amber! Shaggy! Help!
Those are the girls.
This leads into Shaggy and Scooby having one of their rare, but oh so satisfying moments of bravery. Steve and Laura try to make a break for it, but turnabout is fair play and Fred manages to snag them in the cargo net. With the bad guys caught, Crystal comes clean.
We were sent by our world to investigate signals from your planet.
Transmitted from the South Station.
Dig that, Scoob! A talking dog.
Real?
Imagine that.
I love how Fred is just done with everything in this movie by this point. Anyway, the disguises Crystal and Amber chose were based on TV signals their planet picked up, but because of the distances involved, said signals were broadcast back in the 60s. Crystal and Amber's ship arrives, which is, of course, the one the gang spotted at the beginning of the movie, which means it's time for Shaggy to say goodbye.
I'm looking for someone too, but they say long-distance relationships never work out.
Yeah.
Yep, stick a fork in Fred, he's done. So, Crystal and Amber take off and the South team's arrested, tormented with the knowledge that no one will ever believe them since they have no proof that real aliens were ever there.
I've got pictures.
Hey, now they'll believe us?
Yeah.
Maybe we can get a book deal.
Our luck's changing.
You know what, crushed hope is much better than fatalistic resignation any day. Buck shows up with the repaired mystery machine and it's revealed he was out collecting flowers the day before. So the gang begins loading up to leave, with Shaggy and Scooby convinced that life has no meaning.
Oh, guys, you missed one.
And our heroes drive off into the sunrise with another case closed. Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders is okay. Its main flaws are telegraphing both reveals way too early in the film, and while you might not be able to guess that Crystal and Amber are aliens to begin with if this is the first of these films you watch, if you've seen the previous two, you can pretty much figure it out. And while the actual motivations of the South team are hard to figure out until the gold reveal, you know they're up to something and are most likely behind whatever's going on. Visually, it's very good. The alien ship in the beginning is gorgeous, and the character designs of Crystal and Amber in both forms complement the aesthetic of the movie. And while I'm normally against romantic subplots these days, the one presented here is cute, funny, and a little heartbreaking. The voice work remains top-notch, and all the characters, even the MPs, are interesting and memorable. So overall, this is perfectly serviceable. Maybe not as good as Zombie Island or Witch's Ghost, but a fairly solid entry in the series. I'd say give it a watch if you're curious. And so, it's time to blast off until the next of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Here come those meddling kids to join the chase.